Hello, and welcome to the basics of identifying common sedimentary rocks. Today I'm going to demonstrate for you the standard operating procedure I created to help you with the basics of identifying the most common sedimentary rocks that you're most likely to encounter. Now, let's get into it. The SOP is designed as a flowchart to make the process of identifying a rock intuitive and easy to follow. It also contains several reference images and official charts of the kind that geologists use. The intended audience for this SOP is geology students who have a background in basic geology and are beginning to move into more in-depth topics. For example, a third-year student like myself who has been learning about this information over the past semester. What I am going to do is go through the main part of the SOP, the flowchart, and show you how it works. I will not use up my limited time to define every term or give in-depth explanation of the graphs, since the intended audience will already understand these concepts, but I have designed the SOP in such a way that I expect beginners will be able to use it without difficulty in most cases. I will now demonstrate. So as you can see here, I have a rock that I'm going to be demonstrating the SOP format on. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to start with the more obvious elements of this rock, and then we're going to work our way down to the more fine and nitty-gritty details. What we're going to take a look at now is the general color and appearance of this rock. As we can see, it does not have a dark brown or black color, and it does not have a carbon-like or charcoal-like appearance. We can also take a look at the reference images, which were, and still are, included in the SOP in order to see if our rock is at all similar to any of these rocks, which can be pretty easily identified on site. But since it is not, we can move on. This means we are able to pretty easily eliminate our first group of sedimentary rocks, the carbonaceous rocks, which include things like coal or peat. The next thing we're going to check for is whether it will have a reaction to diluted hydrochloric acid. If it does, that means we can pretty easily determine it's a carbonate rock. If it doesn't, that means it's probably a siliciclastic rock. So let's test this out and see what happens. As we can see, the rock has no reaction to the acid at all. This means we can very easily eliminate the carbonate group and place this rock pretty firmly in the siliciclastic group. So now that we've got the more obvious things out of the way, the next thing we're going to do is start looking at some of the more fine details of this rock. So we're going to take our hand lens, which is an essential tool for any geologist, and we're going to use this hand lens to check the little not so obvious characteristics of this rock, such as mineral content, grain size, grain shape, and the ratio of grains to the matrix or cement that's holding it all together. So we can see this rock here. It may not be so visible in camera, but it is pretty much 100% quartz. So no feldspars, no lithics, it's all quartz. That gives us our first pretty big clue as to what this rock is. But we'll also check for things like matrix cement, just to be sure. So looking at this rock, we can see there is almost no matrix, no cement holding it all together. It is 100% quartz grains. And that means we can pretty solidly place it using our flow chart, and that means this rock here is a quartz arenite, a rock that is nearly 100% quartz with no mud matrix. That's how we can use our flowchart SOP in order to determine what kind of rock a sedimentary rock is. In order to test the SOP, I asked one of my family members, who is not a geologist herself, but often asks me to identify rocks for her, to try it out and see how it went. It started out pretty well. She was able to eliminate the carbonaceous rocks pretty quickly, and so we moved on to the acid test. Once we performed the acid test, it was pretty clear that this rock was not a carbonate, so we moved on from there. During these early parts of the procedure, there were no issues. Just as I had hoped, the SOP, while not targeted specifically toward beginners, was simple enough that beginners who had no real experience with geology would be able to use it for themselves and follow along with the instructions. When we reach the next slide, the part of the SOP about identifying extremes in grain sizes and matrix content, we ran into a bit of a problem. She had missed the part of the instructions that specified looking for at least 50% matrix, and so this led to a little bit of confusion before that was cleared up. We got that dealt with and went back on track. However, I did notice somewhat of a common thread between the couple of people who looked at this SOP so far and gave feedback or evaluation, in that parts of the instructions or the content of the slides, specifically the reference images, were overlooked or not noticed or simply skipped entirely. This means that potential areas for improvement on this SOP could simply be just adjusting the layout, the formatting, to ensure that everything is obvious and nothing is missed. In this case, I was there to clear up the confusion and get things back on track. However, I, of course, might not be there in every single situation that this SOP could conceivably be used in. And if I had not been there, most likely a wrong conclusion would have been reached in the end. And of course, we don't want that. We want to ensure that the SOP is as clear as possible. We want to make sure that everyone who uses it will be able to understand it and get the right results in what they are doing. It also serves as an example of why carefully reading the instructions is important and why it is important to pay attention to the content of all these slides, just to make sure that you don't accidentally miss something and end up coming to the wrong conclusion. From that point on, it was easy to continue forward and to find that there was really only one option left that this rock could be. After examining all the flowchart steps and checking over the procedures, she arrived to the conclusion that this rock was a mudstone, and by my geological estimation, I would say that was correct. And so, I'd say that this standard operating procedure is a success, and that people who are not used to geological procedures, even they will be able to follow this SOP pretty easily. And there you have it. The basic procedures to identify the most common sedimentary rocks that you'll most likely encounter throughout your career. I hope this video has been informative for you, and I hope that the standard operating procedure I created will help you throughout your geological career. Thank you for watching.